Welcome back to the Fantasy Network. I am, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and we're back for In a Nutshell. You're here with the Friday Night Delight live, or maybe after the fact as well. And if you're watching after the fact, then you kind of want to skip over some of the chat interactions. Just remember that all of the books are timestamped down below for your convenience. But sometimes the chat brings up some of the best points in the stream, in my opinion. But this is going to be all about what I read in March, and maybe a look ahead of what we're going to read in April. I'm really not sure, and I'll explain why that is when I get to the end of wrapping up all these books, because there's a book on this list that has kind of just put me still in my stance, not because it was bad, but the exact opposite in many ways, and very depressing, which is kind of par for the course for books that I myself enjoy. I hope that everyone had a wonderful March. I did. A bit of a weird one. I think this is one of those months where if I were to look at my reading, it was very front heavy and then basically nothing for almost 10 days. And that's because I had some visitors and genuinely probably one of the greatest weeks of my life, and being able to share moments with people who, I've known for years. Some of them I actually had not had the privilege of meeting in person yet, but getting to spend so much of that time was incredibly moving. And I feel very, very blessed for the time that I had. But in that time, I did not read. And I'm kind of glad, because the book I'm going to talk about at the very end, I needed a break. I needed a little bit of a break from it, which will all be explained. And then I came back to it and I'm like, oh, I still need more time. So a little bit of a lopsided month, but overall a really great month. I think there are two books here tonight that I'll talk about that are definitely going to be in contention for that top 10 at the end of the year. Book of the year, certainly up for grabs at this point. I've read some really good stuff so far in 2025, but I just continue to read really, really good stuff. So that's really great. I have a book I'm kind of mixed on, book that I'm really positive on. That's kind of opened up a whole genre for me in many ways. Just a genre I haven't spent a ton of time in, which will probably be the first book that I talk about. And we're going to jump into it here after I kind of go through the usual suspects here in chat. I love seeing everyone communing. It's very nice here on a Friday night to be able to come in here and just talk about books and kind of relax a little bit, because, whenever you have basically a vacation with a bunch of friends meeting up, that come down sucks. It really does. Mitch says, these Mitches love Sosa. I like the play on words here. And happy Friday to everyone. StoryTube, actually, two of the people who I did get to spend a week with, which was fantastic. And shout out to StoryTube, Carlos and Yolanda. They've been on the channel multiple times. They check them out. Please do check them out. But I would like to say, you might notice behind me, these shelves look a lot more organized. There's not random books falling down. There's not random things everywhere. And that's because StoryTube, while they were here in the Nut House, decided to reorganize my shelves. And I think at the end, it came out beautifully. But I also think that they now understand why my shelves were in such disarray, because it took us 4 or 5 hours to 4 people to really reorganize the shelves. And it's getting more and more ludicrous by the day that I was able to unhaul some books and kind of shrink up the book space a little bit. David said, if Jimmy doesn't go live with that snazzy shirt, I'm throwing hands. You will be throwing hands. That shirt does not fit me anymore. My back is too wide. All right, I might have just bought too small of a shirt. Let's be honest. I wonder what Jimmy is drinking. This is a specialty Guinness brew that they have in my area, and I am drinking it, and it's wonderful. And I'm not a big beer guy at all, but I like this one, and I figured now is better time than any, if at all. So no videos with StoryTube. No videos with StoryTube, Sam. We were just having too much fun. We were having too much fun. And I did put them to work on their vacation, Evie, but it was by their request. So I'm very thankful for their help, because it's a very overwhelming task. But I love the way the shelves have turned out. And, maybe one day I'll do an updated bookshelf tour, because I did it like my first year or two of BookTube and despised doing it. But maybe with the help of Mrs. Nuts, it won't be as tedious as it was back then. Who knows? And it was fun reorganizing those bookshelves, Christine. It was actually really nice. So we're also going to be doing the Patreon pick after I cover all the books that I read this month. I think this one's going to be a long stream. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I just get the feeling this is going to be a longer stream. But all the way at the end, I will be selecting the random Patreon pick of the month. And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to BellTube, another booktuber here on YouTube. BellTube is dealing with the loss of a loved one. And I just wanted to tell you, BellTube, that we are here for you as a community, and I'm also here for you as your friend. And I'm so glad that you're here tonight. I hope we can keep your mind off things and that we can have some fun talking about some books. Wishing the best for you and your family, Brian. I really am. All right, let's talk about some books. Whoo boy, this is going to be a fun one because there's just so many books I'm excited to talk about and excited to recommend to people who watch my channel, because I'm not totally sure a lot of people that watch my channel read these books. The first one, Red Rabbit by Alex Grecian. This was the Patreon pick for March and was a little bit curious. I read the description last month when in a Nuttshell, and we decided that this was a supernatural Western horror with some fantastical elements and everything else. You know, supernatural, fantasy, sci-fi. It's all kind of in the same wheelhouse for me. But Red Rabbit, I think it's like 400-something pages. Wasn't sure what to expect from it. And I loved this book. I thought this book was absolutely fabulous. First off, I really do like Westerns. Now, I don't like all Westerns, and I'm not deeply read in them, but every time it seems that I pick up a Western, I love it. I love The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. That was a movie I watched a lot whenever I was a kid, forever long, but man, I loved it. This really captures that Western vibe. Late 19th century, we are going after a witch, and there are a group of people doing so. There's also other groups of people who are either trying to achieve the same goal or have their own goals or after people in our fellowship. And this ragtag group that comes together as a fellowship was so freaking good. I loved the dynamic between all of the characters. I thought the dialogue between the characters was absolutely fantastic. And as far as premise goes, I've kind of told you everything I'm willing to tell you because this book does have a lot of twists and turns. I've seen some people online say that it's a bit predictable. I was kept guessing fairly deep into the book until the very ending. I had kind of an idea where the ending might go, and I was like half right. But I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me too much. There were some genuine surprises in this novel, not just the fact that I loved it so much, but decisions and events happening, and also expectations of the characters that you meet them and then you find out a little bit more about them. I thought that this book handled the supernatural and like post-death better than pretty much any book that I have read. I am not super well read in horror. I am very well watched in horror. I've seen so many horror movies at this point, and I love them. They're my favorite genre of movie. And all I can think about is how this book would make such a good A24 film. And it has completely opened up my mind to reading more horror. I am not naive enough to believe that there are no good books in horror or any genre for that matter. I stick up for romantic books or, romance books all the time, even though I don't read them, because I'm like, there has to be some good there. Like, there's definitely some good there. Every genre has, low tier stuff or whatever. Red Rabbit, to me, I would assume, is one of the higher end, like, get people started in the genre type book for horror. And I'll tell you what, if more books can deliver like this for me in the horror genre, I'm going to be reading a whole lot more horror. It's so good. Also, love the late 19th century in America. That's kind of my jam. And it deals with, for instance, racism very well. It flows naturally into the story. It plays into characters and also the dynamics between characters. And it's a fabulous book. I don't know why this isn't overwhelmingly positive. The only reason I can think of is that I'm trying to keep my overwhelmingly positive, which is the highest rating you can get here on In a Nuttshell. Not that it matters really, but that's kind of reserved for like, hey, this is probably gonna be like a top 10 book. Like, this is in contention for book of the year type deal. I don't know if Red Rabbit is book of the year. It could win one of my extra awards at the end of the year, like maybe best non-science fiction fantasy book or best new author to me. I mean, Alex Grecian, I just thought nailed it. And if you're someone who likes dialogue, which shout out to Carlos from StoryTube, I know he does. I thought it was fantastic. And I had a couple patrons read this alongside of me, and they also really, really enjoyed it. And this is my patrons' taste is varied greatly. Most of the time I love a book, I'll go talk about it, and then I'll just see like a bunch of people read it and be like, this sucks. And I'm like, well, that's unfortunate. So I'm just saying there's a large range of opinions, and many people enjoyed this. This was an absolute slammer for me. Loved it. Alex Grecian, when I was finishing it, found out 2 Tuesdays ago, found out he has a new book, which is called, I believe, The Rose of Jericho. Banger title. And it's kind of like that colonial witch hunt era up in New England. I will say this, do not read the back of that book. I read the back of that book about 50 pages from the end of Red Rabbit because I'm like, oh, this is a new standalone because it says it's not a series. It spoils the end of this book. Do not read the synopsis of his new book. It will ruin this book for you. I don't know why it's not considered a series. I'm sure he just kind of wants to write a little bit here, a little bit there, but there are characters from Red Rabbit that you will know of that are mentioned in the synopsis. So please, please, please do not read the Rose of Jericho synopsis on the back until you read Red Rabbit, which I implore you to do. I am going to give this the nut button. This is absolutely getting the nut button. This is probably my favorite horror book that I have read. Maybe ever. I mean, Pet Sematary has always kind of been that one for me because of the inspection of grief and that being so palpable and like upsetting. But this book actually creeped me out at times. And I think the fact that it was historical and the way the West is like just very eerie, if you think about it. At least I've always felt that way. I've always felt uneasy reading Blood Meridian, not just because of all the violence, but the setting. Home run. Alex Grecian. I hope it's Grecian. It might be Grecian. I don't know. Amazing. And Night of the Mannequins, I saw someone mention Night of the Mannequins in chat, also would be up there. And I think that Alex Grecian reminds me somewhat of Stephen Graham Jones, maybe just a little less stylized, though. Stephen Graham Jones is one of those authors that people kind of love or hate because of his style choices. I think Grecian has a wider audience potential because his style isn't as distinct. Not saying that a distinct style is bad. I'm just saying for people being able to kind of swallow it. I think that this works very well. Awesome book, dude. Like, honestly, made my month. When I read, I am not typically in my Discord updating as I read very often because I kind of want to just have my own thoughts and opinions and then come with them, right? And present them. This one, I couldn't help it update. I'm like, guys, banger alert. Like I'm through part 1, banger alert. I was so enthused about reading this book. It went down as fast as any book I've read this year, probably. And Rose of Jericho is on the immediate TBR. I have it downstairs. And if it wasn't for wanting to get a little bit more variety in this month and taking a whole week off of reading, more than a week, I probably would have read the sequel already. Like that's how good it was. So fantastic. I'm so happy. This was once again shows that my Patreon pick of the month almost always ends up expanding my horizons and giving me new favorites. And here we are. Here we are once again. I can't tell you, I can't say enough about how much I appreciate the random book of the month because I get things like this. This would have never made it on the TBR. And I implore you all, if something sounds even remotely interesting when I draw the random book, hey, let's read it together. Pick up, and this is what happened in my Patreon. A lot of people are like, hey, I've been wanting to read that. I'll check it out. And it was a success. You know, it's not always going to be, but this one certainly was. So fantastic. Cheers to Alex Grecian, Red Rabbit, banger. Absolute banger. Talking story. What's up, Mintons? How are you? Some horror love. I am digging it. Oh yeah. Lots and lots and lots and lots of love for this book. I am beyond impressed with it. And you know what? I'm not saying it's going to win any literary awards, but to me, I thought it went places that you wouldn't maybe expect. And I do mean like thematically. So I'm very, very high on this book. I'll stop ranting because I'm going to be gushing about 2 other books on this stream too. That's why I said this is going to be probably a longer stream because I want to get across my, my excitement. And, sometimes I can be a bit long-winded, as some of you might know. StoryTube says Western horror sold. Absolutely. Absolutely. Andre says Red Rabbit was awesome. Had some gripes, but the atmosphere and cast characters was top notch. Yeah, not saying it would be a perfect book for everyone, but I think there's just so much going for it that it's hard not to kind of love what's going on there. Zealy Green says it was awesome. Rose of Jericho is already headed my way. I'm with you, Zeely. I want to read Rose of Jericho so badly. Rodrigo says, I am 30% into Red Rabbit, loving it. I love Sadie and Tom. Tom's the MVP. Navarra, right? I would like him, but I kind of do. Oh, never thought that you would like. Yeah, Tom is one of those characters that you kind of love to hate a little bit, but I also thought Tom's dialogue was bang up job. Your Brain on Books, which is our good friend Baron, took a little hiatus from BookTube. If you want to check out his channel, it's Your Brain on Books. Great channel name, and he does amazing reviews. He actually posted a Red Rabbit review, and I would implore you all to go check it out for a little bit more about it. It's a very, very, very good book. And Baron, unlike me, has read way more horror. So his opinion probably has a little bit more weight when it comes to that genre, in my opinion. So Comrade Nerd says, Alex Grecian also writes historical mysteries. Yeah, I saw that he had like a really long English series. I believe it's mystery. And I have thought about picking it up. I think I'm going to stick with this line because it seems like he puts out books pretty frequently. So we'll see. StoryTube said, we have just purchased it because clearly hauling 29 books back to Ireland was not enough. Your suitcase was indeed very, very full. What's up, Dark One's Tank? Good to see you, my friend. Always love seeing you in the chat. Let's see. Cries and Native Americans. Yes, yes. Chadia, huge fan. Love to see it. And David said, you should take a couple weeks to read the whole Patron spreadsheet. Well, there's over 100 people. I think there's 104 people on the Patreon. So that would actually take me far longer than just a couple weeks. And also, there are books on there that are the size of my head, which I have dodged recently more so than have hit them, which has been wonderful, which means I'll probably draw a 1,300-page chunker tonight. Gooner Quinn, phenomenal name. This book was so good. Goonworthy, maybe? Leonel says, Lionel, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing. I love the name. Well, you sold me, ordered it. I'm glad. Ryan Turbush, what's up, Ryan? Says, return to Gurm means a return to the Game of Thrones whiskeys. Yeah, I'll tell you what, they're almost gone. I've drank all the good ones, and now the only thing I have left, which, by the way, has taken many, many years and sharing them with people, but I'm down to the lower houses, and the lower houses Game of Thrones whiskey is not nearly as good as some of the other ones. So, oh, wonderful! The Shadow of Bizu says, "Thank God it was translated to my language. Getting it ASAP." I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that for sure. It sounds like I influenced a bunch of people to read Red Rabbit, which I'll be honest, makes me a little bit nervous because I always worry that people will go out, spend their hard-earned money, and then not like it. I hope that if you pick it up that you do enjoy it. And if you could do me a favor, I genuinely love hearing what people think of books that I've read. Come back and leave a comment on the video. Obviously, if you're part of the Patreon Discord, you can hit me up in there. But leave a comment on this video, even if it's in 2, 3, 4 weeks or months. I would love for you to come back and let me know how you find it. Someone mentioned the Return the Gurm. It was the title of the video. Let's do it. Did my favorite author deliver once again? Yes, but he didn't do it by himself. He co-authored this book many moons ago. Actually, wasn't that far, that long ago, with Lisa Tuttle, who, if you've ever heard Gurm talk of, I'm overwhelmingly positive about this book. George R. R. Martin has so much respect for Lisa Tuttle and her ability to write. It is almost impossible for him to not mention her whenever he's talking about talented authors. And they co-authored this book, which has an interesting history in the fact that it actually was 2 novellas, and then they decided to put it into a book. So they created a 3rd act to this book. So it's separated into 3 acts. They are pretty distinct and cover different time periods. So I don't want to call it a generational story, but you are really kind of living a life with somebody, though it's not a slice of life at all, but you're going to see people age, which is really, really cool. This is also classic George R. R. Martin, and I know Lisa Tuttle had a huge hand in this, and they co-authored this. I think that you can tell there's a lot of Gurm here, thematically, also in the writing, but there's something else, and I believe that would be Lisa Tuttle, and it is magic. This book is not super highly rated. I do want to put that out there. It's not super well received by the Goodreads crowd, but it has received a lot of praise from other reviewers that aren't just on Goodreads. So it's kind of one of these weird books where maybe the masses didn't love it, but it seems like a lot of critics did. And I am not a critic, but I also loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It blends science fiction and fantasy, which is something George has always talked about. And it is pretty cool. Windhaven is almost fantasy-esque until you realize that this is kind of space travelers landed on a planet and they have now inhabited it. It's been many generations, I believe. And this planet is separated into islands. And the way that they continue to use communication or have communication between each other is they use these things called wings, which are essentially like gliding suits, and they fly to the islands. And because these suits, or these wings as we'll call them, are so important, it actually starts developing a caste system. And the wings are passed down through families. And as you can imagine, this creates a bit of a power struggle for sure. This book is all about rebellion, but the rebellion lasts so little of this book, which by the way is very short. This is about the fallout of rebellion and changing a society and changing a world to topple systems, to topple traditions, something George R. R. Martin loves to inspect. I think that identity has always been one of George R. R. Martin's strengths thematically. And here with Lisa Tuttle, he's able to attack that theme from like a totally different angle. And the true conflict here is identity and community at odds, or maybe at the very least, like out of balance. And that makes for a very compelling story, in my opinion. It goes through the revolution very fast. Like I said, it topples the tradition, but it takes more time to look at about what happens after the fact. And those who assume the new power or status face contradictions within themselves that they didn't know they had because they did not possess the power that they so desperately would like to have had, or privilege, or whatever it is. And those who assume that power then have to kind of face that and reconcile this. And a movement or a rebellion doesn't stop once an individual has what they want. It continues to move ahead. It continues to form, and it can actually be very different than what it started out as. And I think that this book does a really good job of handling this and kind of inspecting it. And there's no easy answers. The revolution moves on. It shapes the desires and pleas of the next generation and the class that's moving it ahead. So the people who maybe toppled it are now finding themselves in power and realizing that the rebellion isn't over. And now they're like, well, we want to stable this thing out. We got what we wanted. Well, that's not always how it works. And I think that that is the beauty of this book and the central conflict. There's a sense of like loss and belonging, love, class, and of course, in a George R. R. Martin book, and I want to give credit to Lisa Tuttle, but I'm so familiar with his work and his themes. But the number one being duty, which William Faulkner, the heart in conflict with itself is what he wanted to write about. George R. R. Martin is a believer of that. I think Lisa Tuttle would probably be a believer of that. And that's exactly what this story is. So very similar in some regards to the things that he always wants to write about. But there's clearly a lot about Lisa Tuttle that gets mixed in here that makes it, honestly, a really special book. There's something kind of personal about this book that I actually really attached to. And I think this is why I ended up kind of being speechless when I ended it. And really thinking this is one of the finer science fiction fantasy books that I've read in quite a while. And it's losing what you are and having to handle the imbalance within yourself and in your life that you've created around this thing that you consider to be your identity, and being dedicated to that one thing. Like when you lose that, how do you handle that imbalance? How do you handle not having that identity anymore? That's something that happened to me when I was done with pro wrestling. I didn't know what to do. My life was so imbalanced. I was so out of whack, and I didn't even know who I was. And I think that this book does such a good job, like a masterful job of inspecting this. And it's something I've been telling anyone who's watched this channel for a long period of time knows. I've been asking for stories that go through this, and people have given recommendations. It's been great. This is the best example of that. And it made me distraught, but I felt seen. And if there's one thing a book can do to touch a reader, I think is to see them. And this book touched my heart. I mean, I was extremely emotional reading this. I love the relationships and how much they mean to the characters, even though to the overall plot, I wouldn't say that, you know, any of the romance or friendships like really drive home a point in the plot. Well, kind of. I should say it just feels like it's very natural. It doesn't feel forced to make a point or anything. And this book really did touch my heart. I think that this is fabulous. There was supposed to be more. It never happened. George is doing things. I'm sure Lisa Tuttle's doing things. But if this is all we'll ever have from Windhaven, which I think it will be, I'm so thankful for that. And George R. R. Martin continues to amaze me in many ways, and now has opened up the opportunity for me to read more Lisa Tuttle, who he holds in super high regard, and I do too, for her work on this book. I think that the 3-act structure and them tying it together with the 3rd act really does work. I think it's a pretty interesting way of this coming about. But if you like a story about the fallout of rebellion, then I would definitely suggest this, or losing one's identity based on what they've always wanted and then having it stripped from them. I think that it deserves a nut button. Would it not? I think it deserves a nut button. Absolutely in book of the year contention for me. It is awesome whenever I pick up a George R. R. Martin book and just love it. I've been reading a ton of his short stories lately, and really enjoying it with Dream Songs, which is essentially his memoir as well. He kind of talks about when he published the story and themes and all this other stuff. Some really great stuff there. I'd love to make a video about it eventually, but awesome. I mean, I'm just happy. I'm just happy to have read another book from my favorite author and be introduced to another one and have it be just this high for me. So if you read it and hate it, I'm sorry. Andre says 105 watching. Wow, it is that many. And only 33 likes. Smash that like button. It would help. But, you know, only if you feel like it. You can also dislike it. That's totally valid. Evie said, for those listening, it's Windhaven. My bad. Did I forget to say the name? I'm not doing a very good job of hosting my own show, am I? Reader in the Desert, Sarah Beth says, just saw the Game of Thrones whiskey bottles at a local restaurant 2 weeks ago. The bottles are gorgeous. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Damn, that is a pretty old book. Yeah, I guess it is. Rodrigo says, I honestly don't take Goodreads ratings too seriously. I feel that way, kind of like the Rotten Tomatoes for books. I totally understand what you're saying. I would rather formulate kind of my own opinion and try not to let that kind of stuff sway me. I've actually been thinking about doing a segment on here. Someone did just smash that dislike button. I very much appreciate that. There is a part of me that wants to include the average Goodreads rating and just like to say, hey, look, I agreed with Goodreads or I didn't, because let's be honest, like Goodreads is the main platform people use to rate books. So I think in the coming month, I will start including a Goodreads average just to see. A lot of times I am not in line with Goodreads, not because I'm better than them or anything, it's just different taste, I would assume. So, and hopefully encourage you to, you know, if you end up reading one of these books that's low rated on Goodreads, like a 3, that you would maybe not let that bother you as much. Because I do know people, they're like, it has a 3 on Goodreads, I'm not going to check it out. I'm like, please. All my favorite book. Ishiguro never gets highly rated on anything. And he's like, you know, arguably my second favorite author at this point. So Chadia says, I've had this on my shelves for decades. Maybe Jimmy can finally convince me to tackle it. Let's hope I did. Mitch said, was going to pick this up. Problem was it was right by Storm of Swords, an unfortunate problem that might not ever be overcome. Hey, that is pretty much the case with all of George's books. It seems that, I mean, I don't know if anything's as good as Storm of Swords for me, but it does seem like people want to stick to what they consider his best. But I think he has a lot of stuff to offer outside of A Song of Ice and Fire that is just as good, if not somewhat better. Sand Kings being a great example of that. Shadow Bizu says pro wrestling. Yes, I was a pro wrestler. Many people are tired of hearing about it because I mentioned it so often. I've been trying to mention it a lot less lately. Talking Story says, damn, you're making me want to read all of these. That is kind of my thing. That's what I do here. StoryTube says, Rebellion, Fall to Rebellion in a short book by George R. R. Martin. I have no choice. Bought it. I'm just wrecking everyone's bank accounts. Didn't this guy start a fantasy series? Yeah, I heard it. I heard it's pretty good, actually. Chadia says, yes, okay, I already took it off the shelf. Mission accomplished. Cy Kepler says, so this March was full of nuts, apparently. Yeah, you're damn right. You're damn right. Dale says, this sounds like a book I need right now. I love to hear it. I love to hear it. And Lucas says, you're welcome for the dislike. Thank you, Lucas. Very, very nice of you. Just hit the like button with a scorpion death drop. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Christine says, I am a fan of 3-star. I find so many 5-star for me books there. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times 3-star books are trying to do something different, and a lot of people don't like different. I do, most of the time. Not always. Oh, man. Speaking of Storm of Swords, I have a special edition that you want. Oh, really? You're making me jealous. Adam says, just ordered Windhaven. All right, so my book fluencing is done for the day. I'm getting my kickbacks from Amazon or your local bookstore. I made my money. I'm out. No, I'm just kidding. If you are buying these books, I always encourage everyone to use the library, but I hope that you like it, and I hope I don't lead you astray, because that would make me feel very bad. Let's talk about the book that I was mixed on. This is a book that was recommended by my friend Bridger from the Library Ladder, and it is a book that is extremely highly regarded, and an author that is regarded, and that is Jose Saramago. I hope I'm saying that correctly, and the book is titled Blindness. This is award-winning. This is considered his most popular book, and it has been recognized by anybody and everybody out there. And this is a kind of like, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, but a very bad situation to put humanity in to see how they react, which is there is a sudden epidemic of blindness, like a white blindness going through this random town that I think is supposed to be Portugal. This is, the home of where this author is, and it is an allegory for authoritarianism that was in Portugal, and how when the people were at their worst, they were hoping that the systems would help them out. And of course, in that kind of regime, it did not. And a lot of this is a metaphor for that. I think it's also just a metaphor for the way humans interact with each other during stressful situations. I read High Rise by J.G. Ballard, and I would be lying if I said this didn't remind me a little bit about that, because we are putting humans in a small space under really bad circumstances and having people figure it out. And it does bring out some of the worst traits in humanity. The difference being is that Saramago, I think, is doing some tremendous things with his writing. And I have to acknowledge that. I think that the style of this book absolutely fits the narrative and the story that he is trying to tell. There are very, very few punctuation marks. There's a lot of periods and commas, but there's no like semicolons. There's no dialogue tags, which I felt was probably intentional for the book's premise, which I love a good style clash, or I should say match, with the type of story that the author is trying to tell. It has these very, very long-winded paragraphs. I mean, some of these paragraphs, I felt like they were going on for pages. And in that, I did find the book at times to be a bit exhausting. This is a book I actually started 2 months ago. I put it down and I finished it this month. So this is just to show you, if I pause a book, Wolf Hall, doesn't mean that I'm DNFing it. Sometimes it just takes me to get back to it in a certain type of mood. And Blindness was that. I found Blindness to be very tough to get through, mainly due to the fact that I found it harrowing and haunting, and felt like the text was also exhausting me just based on the style. I'm not saying the style is bad. I'm saying it was kind of exhausting to read, which gave me a very mixed reading experience. I did the last probably 30% of this on audio, and still felt a little bit of that fatigue. So the reason why I'm mixed on this book is not because I think it's not a good book, but it's simply for the fact that the reading experience of it, while it matched the story, was tiresome, very, very tiresome. I think it's obvious that Saramago is a phenomenal writer. I see why awards were handed out, and I also see why this is such an important book, especially it being allegory for a time and place in Portugal. This book has one of the most disturbing scenes I have ever read, and I'm going to be talking about a book that is kind of in the same vein in a little bit, so I don't want to overuse the same phrases, but I mean, truly one of the most disgusting things I've seen in a book for a human being to do to another human being. And it was, I mean, it troubled me. And I've read a lot of dark stuff. It just seems to be what I'm gravitating towards more and more. But this really tested my limits. I also did have a moment where I felt, I wondered, I said, is this actually how this would go down if people were put in this situation? But I have a strong suspicion, and I don't know this to be fact, but I have a strong suspicion that the worst of humans in this book most likely did happen, and I imagine that's why it was included. I don't think it was to be gratuitous. I think it was probably to illustrate a point. I was just really troubled by it, and maybe one of the only times just based on content that I kind of wanted to put the book down, like, and be like, I think I got it. I think I got it. I'm glad I didn't, because Saramago actually ends up somehow showing a ray of hope and optimism by the end of this book, in my opinion. And for that, I think it's a better story. There is always better times ahead. Hopefully you live to see it. That would be my thing. Hopefully you're a part of the people who actually get to see it. Again, I will comment about that a little bit later on during another book. Kind of weird how this book coincides with another one that I read this month. One other thing to note about this book is that the characters don't really have names. They have titles. So you have a doctor, doctor's wife, man with, I think it was a black hat. So the characters aren't named. The places aren't named. I think that's very intentional, and it's very powerful. But again, can kind of lead to a bit of that distance. I almost felt distant from the cast. But also what they're going through is so human that it was hard not to feel empathy for them. So it's a very challenging book, in my opinion, even though it's fairly short. This was made into a major motion picture. I have not watched it. I've heard it's good. I would like to watch it. Maybe I can, appreciate the book even more. But this is obviously a really well-written book that means a lot to a lot of people. It just really was not my full-blown cup of tea. And I did find it very difficult to get through some of the grimness of it, which I think is saying something. So it's a mixed reaction for me, basically being able to acknowledge a lot of what's great here, especially in the writing, but also just to be able to say, hey, I didn't have fun reading this. So that's that subjective experience that we always talk about. So I see Bridger is here, who did recommend this book. He said, mixed, but your assessment is fair. Yeah, this is I have a deep appreciation for everything the book is doing, but I can't pretend that I was excited to pick it up every time, mainly because I was so depressed by it, which is not the only book this month that did that. So maybe some people will still want to pick this one up, though, based on that. I'm sure Bridger will have something to say in a future video about this book, so he'll probably be able to say way more than I can. And also shout out to Bridger, because he's the one who actually informed me about this being a bit of an allegory for times in Portugal in past during, a authoritarian regime. I didn't know all that. It definitely helped me appreciate the book a little bit more, so shout out to him. Always learning things from Bridger. FC says, Blindness is so good. I'm glad. Oh, what's up, Frank? I was life, behind me is nothing. That line was just perfect. Audiobook made it easier. Yeah, if you're one that enjoys just lines that kind of stand you still and go, wow, this book has a lot of them. A lot of them. And I think it's those lines, when they're delivered, that kind of help with that bit of distance that you might feel. There is like a physical reaction to this book, which with the blindness spreading, that I think is like kind of crazy that he was able to pull that off. Let's see. Shadow Bazoo says, would you say it's the author's intention for it to be exhausting and difficult, like artistic intent to make the reader feel that way? I think it's possible. I think that he is very effective in getting a physical reaction from the reader, not just like cringing at the awful things, but also just the way that it reads. So yeah, and I think that that's a pretty good sign of an amazing writer. I actually would like to read more from this author, by the way. Like Annihilation. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Based on the sum up words, this was disturbing in a distinctly Portuguese way. I would not know. I have tried to learn Portuguese before and was not successful, unfortunately. Matt Keen says there are a few other Saramagos on my TBR ahead of that one. Yeah, I think there's one about Jesus, or it's named after Jesus. I kind of want to read that. I think that would be kind of interesting, depending on what it's actually about. I'm curious if all of his works are like metaphors or allegory. I would love to know. But without a doubt, I would like to try more from this author. Obrigado. Okay, very cool. It's cool how a mixed reaction got an add to my TBR. Sounds really interesting. Andre, that means the world to me, actually, because I'm not trying to make value judgments on anything I read. I don't want people to be like, I'm not one to be like, hey, don't put this on your TV. Like I want to represent the book and then also tack on, hey, this is kind of how, like, this is why I felt the way I did with whatever, rating I put up here. It certainly doesn't mean that I am making a value judgment on the book being, like a 3 out of 5. It's just the book did some things that didn't necessarily click with me. I'm happy I read it though. I really am. Maybe I'll read it again one day. Tom said, now I want to know what was so dark in that book. So here's the thing. There are probably like raw scale darker things that I've read in other books, especially fantasy, like some of the darker fantasy books I've read. But it is the way that it is executed and the way that it arrives and the desperation of that situation and how things are breaking down like a complete collapse that I found just like, it almost is like, why are humans so awful? and I have seen some people push back and say that it wasn't realistic, that exact scene. I tend to lean towards it being realistic, and that is so upsetting to me. So I think there are darker things written. It's the way that it is written that makes me so uneasy. So, oh, Holly said, I meant like Annihilation. You said nobody has a name. Yes. Okay, I see what you mean. Yes. Sorry, sometimes the comments come in as I'm talking, but I don't have that context in my head, so I appreciate you clearing that up. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Evie says, the Gospel According to Jesus Christ, had that on my radar to read alongside The Good Man, Jesus, and the Scoundrel Christ by Philip Pullman as a mini project. I also really wanted to read Him by, I think it's Geoff Ryman or something like that. A lot of Jesus books out there I would like to get to at some point. Okay, so mixed, but pretty cool, I would say. Definitely a book that you might want to be checking out. Battle Ready Mini says, I want to see a Jim with Nuts vid. Hey, you know what? Maybe that could happen. Maybe I'll do a wrap up from the squat rack one day. That'd be great. Let's talk about a fantasy book. That is, I thought it was a new release and then found out book 2 came out this week. So it's not really a new release. I always miss the boat on these things. But The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This book only went on the TBR for one thing and one thing only. And that is because someone told me it was just like Attack on... I shouldn't say just like. They said it was very Attack on Titan inspired in its world building. I said, okay, caste system hidden behind walls and like different walls for different people in the society depending on where they're from and everything. And I said, okie dokie, sign me up. Because even though Attack on Titan is an imperfect story, I think Attack on Titan's premise and largely the first half of Attack on Titan, I think, is the best plot I've ever read. And I love encapsulated people trapped behind walls, trying to figure out why, all this stuff. The Tainted Cup is so strange because it is like an experiment or kind of a showcase of really in-depth world building, like Sanderson level type world building, not a hard magic system or anything, but just like really trying to figure out how the things in this world that are different than ours would affect people on a daily basis. And certainly it affects their society, which is really neat, but it's also a mystery novel, like a detective novel in some ways. And I've seen some people say that this is like Sherlock Holmes. I've not read Sherlock Holmes, so I can't say. Somebody else could answer that question. I'm not sure. But there is a central mystery here. Someone has died under very suspicious circumstances tied into the world building. And of course, that onion unravels and there's many, many layers. And at the end of the book, while we do get some sort of solution, you can tell that this world is ripe for more stories. Very ecological. So much of the world building is tied into the, I don't want to say wildlife, but plant life in the story. And it's also got a bit of like a sci-fi element because people have like different implants and it makes them good at things. Like there's a lot of things that are explained in here. Some of it's info dumped. I'm okay with that. But there's also still so much of it that I'm curious about. So this book as a mystery is good. I haven't read a ton of mystery, so I'm not the guy to come to on this, but like I was satisfied with the mystery. I didn't think it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I thought some of the questions actually posed in Red Rabbit maybe were a little bit more interesting. But The Tainted Cup, for its world building and the characters, I had a great time with this. This was exactly what it needed to be, which is why it's a positive, not a very positive, not overwhelmingly positive. But as a first attempt to read Robert Jackson Bennett, who is Surprisingly popular, by the way. Like, no one really mentions him, at least not people I see. But when you go on Goodreads, his books have a ton of ratings. I was very impressed by that. And it always seems that whenever I go in the store, his books are coming off the shelf. So people seem to really like this author. He seems consistent. This was my first time ever reading Robert Jackson Bennett, and this will not be the last. The Drop of Corruption just came out this past Tuesday. It's the sequel to this. It's another mystery with these characters. I am so in. I'm so very in. And I love that we have this like brainiac, higher caste person who is undertaking kind of like a new detective who has some talents and also some secrets of their past. The dynamic between the two main characters really works for me. And the fact that there's another story set that I'm really hoping expands the world building and gives me a grander sense of plot, like something bigger, more epic. That's exciting stuff. An active, younger author who's going to continue to write. I mean, come on. I'm so in for this. I would love to read his other stuff as well. I've heard varying things about it, but I am without a doubt reading the sequel to this. So as much as I also want to read Alex Gratian's book 2, even though it's not a series, it's such a book 2. I'm reading book 2 of this for sure this month. It'll probably be at the very end of the month, but without a doubt, I'm picking up Drop of Corruption. I will say this with this caveat. If this becomes very just episodic, I'll probably still like it, but I really, really want to see this amazing world building, in my opinion. I mean, I shouldn't say amazing, fascinating world building and the Attack on Titan themes and all this stuff. I want to see that expanded on and get a grander sense of like a more world-changing conflict, which there are hints of in book 1. So I feel as if this will get delivered. I don't know if this is a trilogy. I don't know if it's 10, but I don't know anything about the series or what he intends to do with it. But I get the feeling that we're going to go epic. And when it does, he has an opportunity to do something really freaking cool. I will say, it is so Attack on Titan that I think they even literally use the word Titan in here. And I was like, wow, he really is just like using Attack on Titan language. That's crazy. But it still feels very, very different. The Leviathans, like these sea monsters that are crashing into the wall. Like, dude, big, scary Leviathan sea monsters are sick. And those are kind of what's attacking the wall and getting through. So the question is, are the sea monsters the real threat or what's inside the walls? Kind of a stupid pitch, but truly that is a lot of what this is about. Like it. Almost love it. But I want to see more. This has to grow into something more epic. And then when he handles that transition, it's got to be good, or I could sour on it. Attack on Titan set up some of the most amazing world building plot ever, in my opinion, and did not deliver as much as I wish it had. Sometimes the mysteries are better than the answers. We'll see if Robert Jackson Bennett is able to give us some very satisfying answers as this thing hopefully grows to something a lot more epic. I think that these are pretty popular. Like, I think people are kind of chomping at the bit for book 2. I'd love to know if people in the chat, if you've read this or you intend to read it, did you like it? I haven't heard anything from my corner and like my community about these. So, Meowcat said, reading The Tainted Cup now. And Sarah Beth said, yes, I'm reading Drop of Corruption. So some people have already started. Dang. Okay. Very cool. Very, very cool. Shadow Bizu says, the last act of Attack on Titan grew on me with time. There are things I like, especially thematically, about the ending, but there's also some of the worst things I think I've ever read writing-wise in the end of Attack on Titan. It's and for that, so fun to talk about with friends. Not fun to talk about online very much, but very fun to dissect and pull apart. K-Fox says, plant life, you say? Oh, so much plant life, and it's all tied into the world building. It's so good. I loved it. Robert Jackson Bennett is so good. I recommend the backlist for sure. Beltube said, I think I had to wear a tank cup in Little League. You know what? The book's not getting the nut button, but that comment will get the nut button. Very good. Very, very good. Reader's Journey says Divine Cities trilogy by him as well. That's the one out of his stuff that I've been more interested to read. Comrade Nerd said City of Stairs by him is one of my current reads. Wonderful. Yeah, I feel like he sells. I just don't see him talked about a lot in this corner. Mitch says, I've avoided him because his name sounds like it comes from wealth. I may be completely off. And that would be bad, but that's straight up what's happened. And I must be honest with you all. Mitch, your honesty is so brave. I commend you. Sarah Beth said, the world building is absolutely expanding, completely new place this time. With the same characters? Oh, dude. Okay, that's exciting. That's exciting. Oh, also, I think Robert Jackson Bennett does a really nice job of making me feel like these characters in the world existed prior. This is something I try to highlight anytime it happens in a book, because so many times I'm kind of told about a history or whatever in fantasy, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. I actually felt like these characters had real history. And also one of the main characters kind of has a secret, which you'll have to see what that is and read it. So it'll almost definitely be a trilogy. RJB always does trilogies. Well, in this sense, for me right now, I would say the more books, the better. So, okay, there's a lot of people who've read book 2 that are here. Very cool. Very, very cool. StoryTube says we have purchased 2 out of 4 so far. Not bad. 50% conversion rate. Showing remarkable restraint, in my opinion, although you did sell me on trying Attack on Titan. Yes. But if you try Attack on Titan, you must talk to me about it, because that's the only reason to do it, is to discuss between ourselves. That ending of Attack on Titan is a lot left to be desired. Oh, yeah, for sure. Am I ready to get hurt from another Attack on Titan type of story? Maybe. Hey, this is the only story I've heard like kind of like really inspired by Attack on Titan. Folks, if you have anything that is inspired by Attack on Titan, recommend it to me, please, in the comments. I'm begging you. Leviathan Sea Monster smashing against a wall. You just sold me on this book. I mean, honestly, as simple as that is, it's sick. I thought it was dope. Bridger, my good friend Library Ladder, says, I'm a big fan of his Divine Cities trilogy and looking forward to reading Tainted Cup. I hope you like it. You have a better idea of like his strengths and weaknesses than I do, because you've read his other stuff. But I just found it to be a remarkably fun read, while also having me trying to figure out some stuff, which is always fun in the world building. There's a lot of mystery there. Not just like the detective mystery. Tainted Cup was a booktube darling last year. I know I saw a couple people review it, but like I think I only saw like maybe 2 or 3, which to me, it's just not in like the zeitgeist, I guess. Or maybe I'm not paying attention enough. I don't know. I don't watch enough YouTube anymore, I think. Lucas says Attack on Titan is dope. You should try this book. You really should. Just know it's kind of a Sherlock type deal. Ooh, Aryan Sun says, Attack on Titan borrows from Irakosi, Michael Moorcock, apparently. Okay. I'm always down for Moorcock, so I will be checking that one out for sure, for sure. Shall we move to the final book of the night? And this is the one that I'm probably going to not make a lot of sense on, because I finished it today, which, yes, I know it's April, but it's on the March wrap up, because I've been reading this book for like a month and a half, and that is The Deluge by Stephen Markley. This book has a page count that would make Brandon Sanderson blush, because the way that it's formatted in some circumstances, there's actually more words on the page, and I think if the page was just filled out with words. What a book. What a book. What an absolute ambitious book. Depressing book, riveting, relatable, political, very, very chunky, very, very chunky. This is a climate science fiction novel that is showing the effects of climate change as it progresses. It goes from like 2013 or 14 into the 2000, I believe 40s. I know it's the late 30s and I think into the 40s. The dates all kind of get mixed up in my head. And you are going to be following a cast of characters that are at the beginning so far away from one another and from very different backgrounds with very distinct voices, and then somehow intertwine and meet each other, if not even just for a brief second, but they all have been affected by the climate crisis. This book, I mean, okay, so I've read Ohio by Stephen Markley, which is about small town Appalachia and the bad things that happen there. And even though it's very easy to predict that book, because I grew up in a small town Appalachia and I know the kind of things that happen in those towns, I thought that book was remarkably true and real and well-written and human. And The Deluge is all of that, but way more. I think The Deluge is so impressive for that and for what he is attempting to do. Is it massive? Yes. Does all of it need to be there? I don't know, actually. I don't know. At times where where is this going? Was there a chapter that is literally a legal, like, executive order written out? Yes. Do I think it made the story better? Actually, yeah, I did. What a bizarre book, but what a book to read in our times. Ursula K. Le Guin has a quote, and it's something I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of like fantasy and science fiction is escapism, and that is its strongest suit. I cannot imagine a book that goes against escapism more than The Deluge outside of the genre, of course, like nonfiction. Sure. This book is not a book that you want to read if you're trying to escape, especially like today's issues, all of these things. This book is political at its core, how climate change interacts with that, and essentially climate change affecting everything down to even like personal relationships and locations. But it goes into the political sphere. It goes into being not this thing that is one side or the other, but it becomes this thing where it has to be dealt with. And now it's about how do we deal with this thing? It's not a partisan issue. This is a very American book. I want to put that out there right now. I think if you're not from America, you can certainly read it. But maybe I think there's like two weaknesses to this book. And the first one is the fact that it is extraordinarily American, not unlike Stephen King. I actually think there's a lot of Stephen King in Markley's approach, including some of the weird intrusive thought stuff, but not nearly as weird as Stephen King. So I do think that it kind of maybe limits itself and its impact it could have globally for people who aren't that interested in an American novel. However, if you pay attention all to the world stage, that I think you could still understand everything that's in this book. It feels very real as someone who does live in America. The other thing that I think is kind of impressive about this book, and I give him a lot of credit for, but it's also potentially going to restrict it from becoming a masterpiece or like a modern classic, which again, Stephen King actually said he believes this is a modern classic. I tend to agree with him, but my concern is that this is not a dude that wrote a book far into the future or like in a certain time period, but it doesn't actually really matter. I'm thinking of books like Swan Song, The Stand. This book kind of slots in there with no fantastical elements, really. Some science fiction stuff, but like very much grounded in reality. But even in those books, they happen at a certain time. But after the collapse of society, it doesn't so much matter what time period it is in. This is not about even post-collapse. It's about the problem is happening, it's continuing to happen, and what are the semantics of continuing to be a functioning country during these times, and who is going to take up the mantle of responsibility and engage with this problem. But because it is written in today's, prior to today, and then a little bit in the future, this is going to become alternative history in just a few decades, 1 or 2 decades. I mean, some of it's already that way now. He wrote this before like the 2024 elections and everything, and I would say, actually, he might have been. This is not a very optimistic book. I think that there is an attempt to make it optimistic at the end that fails. Personally, that's just how I feel. I think he might have been too optimistic, actually, in some of his political predictions. And because of that, I think that there's going to be a large amount of people. There's so many hurdles to get this book into your hands and to get you start enjoying it. One is obviously the length. 2 is the weird formatting, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But 3 is going to be people who read this and go, well, that didn't happen. Like his predictions were wrong. But I think if you can get past the fact that not everything is going to be perfectly predicted or whatever, that it's at the very least very interesting to think about. This is haunting and harrowing. And it was just about as troublesome as Blindness was that I mentioned earlier. The structure, very strange. All these different POVs, distinct voices, everything else. But there's also newspaper clippings. There's executive orders written out, which are pretty crazy. There is a character that has like kind of cracked the code on sports gambling. He writes everything kind of like a thesis, very academic approach, very black and white. Very weird. There's also a chapter where you're following around this character and becomes sort of like a climate terrorist in some ways. And instead of including other POVs during the chapter, they're like mentioned in like side boxes for context. And it's like kind of bizarre to read because you're like, when do I read these? My point is that this is not a quick read. It's not a typical read. But at the end of the day, I do think it's very readable. I think the writing's really good. But if you can get around some of that structure stuff, if you're not too worried about predictions always coming true in books, I think that these small blocks and the newspaper clippings actually make the story far better. And could the book work without all these things? Yeah. Do I think the book's better because they're there? Yeah, I do. So for me, this works. I think he really understands being human. And that comes out with those distinct voices that he covers. Characters from all different types of backgrounds, genders, sexual orientation, whatever. And with that, he started to remind me a lot of David Mitchell. I feel like we might have an American David Mitchell on our hands with a big splash of Stephen King in there as well. I don't generally say those type of things because I think it could set the wrong expectations. I still think Mitchell is the superior writer when it comes to the voice of the characters. But man, Markley is impressive. Very, very impressive. Going back and forth through these characters, not really understanding where this whole thing is going, and then eventually kind of tying it together. And then the back half of this book going off a cliff with like, things are happening. Like I talked about the semantics, and so actually some of it's a bit mundane at times if you're not super invested in the personal aspect. But when this book gets going, it absolutely goes off a cliff, and so does the situation. And that to me was just captivating. I took a break for this book whenever I hung out with friends for about 10 days. I'm so glad I did. I needed a break. I would put this book down at times because truly I'm exhausted by the real world. This book is bringing the real world right to your doorstep and saying, hey, it could get even worse. And I don't think it's totally unrealistic, at least some of the things that he puts forward. And I thought it was excellent. There is a couple in the book and two characters. One is named Kate, one is named Matt. It's a very conflicting relationship. And I think until the end, it was probably my favorite part of the book, but the end had me in tears. I can't tell you why, but it is touching. It really affected me greatly. But until the point of the end, Kate and Matt in this relationship, Kate is very much like the go-getter, and she has personality flaws. And honestly, she pissed me off quite a bit in this book, but she was leading a very important movement, which kind of shows that sometimes rebellions are just simply not headed by the people that we wish they were, but they're the people who are, for better or worse, getting things done. And even with all their character flaws, sometimes that's the best that you have at the time. But during that conversation, I just thought it was riveting, and it gripped my heart and my mind for how complex and tough the connection can be based on how you got to where you are in life. And these are two people who got to their situations in a very different manner, who have very different beliefs, that were raised different places in different ways. And I thought that their complex relationship, while frustrating as all hell, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. I couldn't stop reading about it. I didn't feel like it was even unfair to either person, even though both people have traits about them that I very much dislike. I think Kate was extremely manipulative in the relationship, but they both had points when they're having these arguments. And I'm not even really sure what the resolution could have ever been, but I knew I wanted to see what happened next. And that is the best thing a book can do whenever you have questions, is like, well, I'd like to see them answered. This book also has some amazing quotes, and it kind of shows the range of what he's doing here, because at times this book is funny. At times it's scary, and at times it's extraordinarily emotional and frustrating. One of the quotes I have here, and I really enjoyed this one, was, violence against nature always goes hand in hand with violence against people. And then you have this quote, bad weed makes you paranoid. Good weed makes you understand why you should be paranoid. Very different quotes. This next one is a bit longer. And I want to preface this with, Markley, it does give these grandiose statements through character lenses, but he is not always endorsing whatever he's monologuing about, because it's not him, it's the character. And we actually see like a clash of ideals and rhetoric constantly throughout the book, which is why the political aspect of this book is so interesting, because it's not really about like left versus right in America. It is that, but it's also like how to get things done within those systems. And then like, how do you go around, a two-party system? It's very fascinating, but I wanted to read this. And this is one of those long monologues. It is becoming accepted wisdom that we will not all survive the crisis, and therefore the savvy will now entertain previously unthinkable agendas. Forgive me, Congresswoman, for I know you are a mother of four, but child rearing, far from accessing a unrealized spiritual plane, devolves the parent into a selfish, habitual purveyor of violence against those children not his or her own. It is such a small step from believing one's child is special to demanding the eradication of competitor children who would demand their fair share of noodles and broccoli. The unique sensation of loving a child is merely the selfish gene activating, guiding the parent towards discrimination, exploitation, and if necessary, mass murder. Genocides are committed by parents. I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying anyone has to agree, but like, my God. My God. I thought that was like, he does such a good job with rhetoric, whether or not you're going to agree with the character, whether the characters agree with each other. Like, he's really good at writing rhetoric. This is something that Christopher Rocchio actually talked about whenever I interviewed him talking about Sun Eater. And he was saying that one of the things that he believes more writers need to be good at is rhetoric. And Steve Markley is representing an entire political spectrum of beliefs and backgrounds. And I think the rhetoric is, at the very least, interesting. So, also the science fiction aspects of this book, there are some advancements, especially with AI and VR. And it goes exactly how I think most technology goes. It's like, wow, we have this amazing tool. And then it gets used in the most disappointingly absurd way. And that just kind of goes in line with a lot of the recent developments. And I think that highlighting that humans will always surprise us, even if it's in a bizarre way, is very real and very true. And then we get to the ending of this book, which all these ties come in. And when you're done, you're exhausted. I'm exhausted. But at the end, I think that there is a chance for like optimism and hopefulness. But I think it falls into the fallacy that climate change, for example, and these climate crises are going to just stop because we've opened up the door for opportunity. But like, things don't get reversed that simply. So I actually found that the ending, I'm not going to say it missed the mark, but I don't feel the optimism that I do believe Markley was going for. And I didn't necessarily feel like his heart was in it, except for the human relationships, like of a father and a daughter or friends or whatever. Like in that, he found the best of humans. He found hope and optimism in those moments. And for me, I'm a big believer of that. I think that hope and optimism for me usually comes from my relationships with other people rather than what we're up to as humans as a whole. We all think that we will be alive for the best outcome. And sadly, that's just not true for most of us. And this is why I buck back so hard against people who think all books have to have hope and all this shit. Like, I think it's an infantile way of looking at literature, mainly due to the fact that so many of us will not see the happy ending, the resolution, the good side of the rebellion. Most of us will live during transitional periods or whatever else. And even if it's not us, I mean, how many people have passed that didn't get to see the end of it all, right? Like, or like the switch of it all, the goodness of it all. And I think when stories highlight that aspect, it is kind of a bold decision because so many people want hopeful endings and this and that. And this book did try to do that ending, but I don't know if I believe that the soul of this book is in line with that message. But that's just me. That's just my take. I'm also a pessimist. So The Deluge, absolutely not for you if you're not willing to engage, I would say, in political aspects of the world. And it goes way deeper than like a left-right thing. And I don't know. I think this is it's an entertaining book. It's a very personal book, but it's also a book that wants you to engage with it and think as you read. So I don't think it's going to be for a lot of people, really. I think that it's a monumental task to take on something like this right now when, we all have plenty of things to worry about. This book did not ease my mind. It did not make me feel good, but I also thought that it was pretty fantastic. So I feel exhausted after this book. I'm actually hoping this live stream tonight gets me back in the mood to read, because right now I finished it. I loved it. Absolutely getting the nut button. Maybe my book of the, like this, I mean, I'm thinking Percival Everett, like we had Windhaven earlier, like this is definitely in the running for best book of the year. What a surprise. But between Ohio and this, and then him also doing the show Paradise on Hulu has some faults, but I like the show overall. I think Markley is the guy I'm going to be keeping my eye on, and maybe could end up being kind of that successor to King, like Stephen King in some ways, not all, but in some ways, the things I like about Stephen King. So yeah, I'm hoping this, I'm hoping this stream gets me fired up to read, because right now I feel like I just need to take like another week off and then get back to reading. Because right now I don't feel like I have the bandwidth. This was exhausting. So this is one I would be very, very cautious of, like, recommending blanket recommendation. I would implore you to read the sample and maybe read other people's reviews as well, because Lord knows I get it wrong more than I get it right. So, yeah. Oh, Bridger says, The Deluge is my book of the year so far. I mean, it might be mine too. It really might be. I feel like I've read tighter books, but like this book is pretty unique in many ways. StoryTube, so excited to read this slowly for the next 2 months. Yeah, I read it over about a month and a half, and I probably could have slowed down. I really tried to push to get this done before the stream because I wanted to talk about it while I was still like pretty fresh. Shadow Bizu says, political, overwhelmingly positive. I'm in. Yes, very much so. Meowcat said, stop recommending books that sound so awesome and I have to read now. I'm sorry, Meowcat. Chaudia, who's read a lot of the books I've talked about tonight, says, it scared me. It scared me too. And she's a non-American here, and she effing loved it, which is awesome. So, you know, that American kind of forewarning, I just know that there are some people who don't love when books are just centered around America. And I have an international audience, so I felt like I should mention it. But it's certainly possible not to be American and love the book, I think. Mitch said, we might all be Americans. So looking forward to this future, so I might fully vibe with this book. My God. Evie says, similar to Parable of the Sower and Talents with the future projecting, becoming quasi-alternative future. Yeah, I mean, we're going to live, most of us hopefully will live long enough to see this book be right, wrong in many aspects. Like, of course, he's not going to get it all right. But it's something to behold. 41-hour audiobook sounds to me like a weird one to do on audio, though. I thought I started doing immersion reading for this. I read the first half of it eyeballs only, and then I switched to immersion reading, and I thought the audiobook was fantastic, but because there's so many characters and names, it could be very, I couldn't imagine starting this book from audio from the jump. I think that would be difficult, but I'm also not the smartest guy in the world. Belltube says, please tell me the executive orders were written by Timothy Cavendish. No, they were not. I wish they were. StoryTube said, I'm so sold, the urge to buy it all over again. This sounds absolutely incredible. I think you will very much enjoy it. Brent says, wow, I can't think of anything I'd like to read less than The Deluge based on that description. Yeah, you would not like this book at all. At all. Daniel Clauser says, yeah, like, do you think any of the robots can do any of the shit I don't want it to do for me? Or do they all need to be artists? Yeah. Someone please, for the love of God, create a robot that folds laundry. Please? I don't need to do a backflip. I need to fold my laundry. And a bonus point if it puts it away. It's political and about climate change, but at least it's also really long. Oh, it goes deep. It really covers a lot of aspects. It's really hard for me to encompass everything in this book. Like, it's very difficult. Philip and I have chatted about whether stories should have hope at the end. I don't think any story should or has to have anything. I think that would be restriction of art, which I think is silly. Library Ladder says, great review, Jimmy. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yours is much better. much better than mine. Daniel Clauser said, man, I hope we don't see the ending, because if we do, it's not going to be a happy one. Are you going to read Markley's nonfiction? I would love to. I actually am planning on reaching out to Stephen Markley and seeing if he would come on and talk about The Deluge in Ohio, both, because I think both books are fantastic. By the way, if this book doesn't sound like it'd be for you, I do think Ohio is for a lot of people and is pretty incredible. Shadow Bizu says, okay, I'm not sure if I'm in anymore. Fair enough. Hey, Jimmy, have you gotten to Pear-Shaped Man and Dream Songs yet? If so, thoughts? I have not. I don't believe. I did jump around a little bit, so I don't think I've read that one yet. Also, to be honest, it's very... It's hard to remember all the story names because there's so many shorts. I mean, some of them are like 3 pages. So I may have read it and just not remember the title of it. Oh, you're right on the button, brother. The answer is finding a way to pluck out that horrible thing that we call self from our brains. If you figure that out, let me know. I assume it's a bunch of hallucinogens, if I had to guess. Hayden Lau says, I remember finding an arc for that book at work and used it as a doorstop because it was the only one big enough. If I only knew then what I knew now. Andre says, does it predict the Winds of Winter release date? It doesn't, but there's a ton of Game of Thrones references in it, which I appreciated. That's another thing about this book. is I think that a lot of the pop culture references, this is something Stephen King does a lot of. I think that those could also maybe age poorly. So I'm a bit suspect of whether this book will continue to garner critical acclaim far after its publishing date. But for now, it seems very relevant. So cli-fi sounds like a cool genre. Yeah. I have a few books on my shelves that people recommend that are cli-fi, and I plan on reading more for sure. Jared Henderson says, Steve Markley should consider writing a groundbreaking, highly stylized depiction of the life of Thomas Cromwell. You'd probably like that. Jared, I did mention Wolf Hall earlier. I did. I still have not finished it. And also after the Deluge, I got to read something that's not long. I cannot do another long book for a while. My God, this one took it out of me. It really did. With that is all of the books that I did read in the past month, and they were fantastic. I very, very much enjoyed a lot of what I read. Even my mixed book, I had tons to say about and lots to wrestle with. No pun intended. But now, because I'm exhausted and I don't even know I have so many books that I want to read that I can't read any of them. Like I just can't, I feel like I'm never going to make the best decision because there's too many options. There's so many things like Death of the Author by Nanetti, I think is how you say her name, Okorafor. There's also Antidote by Karen Russell. Bazillion books that I want to read. Tainted Cup Book 2. So in for that. Rose of Jericho. Let's find out what I have to read. There's only one book I have to read, and that's the Patreon pick of the month for this. Big shout out to Mrs. Nuts. She made all the things tonight, all the layouts. She also does the Patreon pick. If there is an error on the list, blame her, but don't. Be nice. We are doing this through a form now, so sometimes there's duplicates and stuff, but all things considered, I think we've actually done a pretty decent job here. So I'm going to draw a book, random book from the Patreon. I'm going to spin the wheel. I'm going to pick out the raffler. I don't know why I said wheel. There is no wheel. I would also just like to say that if I select you and you haven't changed your book and you've won already, or I've read the book, you will be passed over. I will not be having 2 Patreon picks. It has to be a book I have not read. So let's see what we get. I don't know. Last month was Red Rabbit. It's going to be hard to top that. So without further ado, let's do the Patreon pick of the month. I'm trying to shake it more, but see, that doesn't work. There's too many balls in here. There's just too many. Mrs. Nuts did have a hilarious misspelling of Portuguese, ungodly bad misspelling of Portuguese on the one slide, and it was very funny. I laughed out loud. It was fantastic. Okay, so the winner for the month of April, I think I said March earlier. The winner for the month of April 2025 is number 27, and that is Zan, long-time supporter of the channel. Can you see this? 27. It's easier when I hold it back here. 27, and that is The Etched City by KJ Bishop. This is a book I have wanted to read for a very long time, and it is, I think, an Australian author. I might be wrong about that, but from what I know, bizarre world building, very, dare I say, ambiguous, and one that has been recommended to me based on things that I've said that I've wanted to see in books. I think I've heard Book of the New Sun-esque weirdness, but I might be wrong on that because it's been a while since I've had this recommended to me. But I will be reading The Etched City. I can't remember the KJ Bishop. It's KJ Bishop. I've had this book for a while, so I'm actually excited that it's a book I already own. I don't have to go buy another book. That's always nice. I have way too many books as it is. So The Etched City, also a very short book. And maybe going from The Deluge, which, freaked me out, way too real, exhausted by it, no escapism. Maybe The Etched City will be so weird that it's exactly what I need at the time. I think that is possible. David said, no way Wandering In is on this list. Dude, people just hate me. I don't know why someone would put the longest thing ever written on the Patreon wheel, but they did. I guess if that happened, I would just have to continue, right? Chadi said, I DNF'd it. Zan is here. Congratulations, Zan. I'm very excited to read The Etched City. You've been telling me to read it for quite a while. More Dark Tower for me anyways. Very, very cool. Mitch said, I'd have sooner seen my wife leave me, my friends ghost me, and my parents disown me than have Zan win again. That is brutal. Absolutely brutal. K Fox said, for once, I'm happy it's not me. The overstory right after the Deluge might be a bit much of the similar theme. K Fox, it's so funny because as I've been perusing my library, like pulling books off, like I might want to read this soon. The overstory was one of the first ones I pulled off. And just like reading the back of it and knowing I'm like, there's no way I can read this right now. But it is on the radar and obviously is allotted with tons of awards. So I would love to read that. So other things. I feel pretty confident that I'm going to read A Drop of Corruption, which is book 2 of whatever the series is called. I can't remember what the series is called. I think it's Leviathan something. But the Robert Jackson Bennett book that I talked about earlier. I cannot say for sure that I'll get to Rose of Jericho. I would like to, but that might be pushed off to May. And I will also say that I am most likely, I started it. I only got about 40 pages in, maybe a little bit longer, but The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison is something I hope to finish this month. And then obviously Etched City is on there. Another book that has been rising up the TBR, and it's one that I would like to get to, is the Matthew Corbett series by Robert McCammon. Speaks to Nightbird being book 1. I've only heard good things about it. It's also in a time period that I'm very interested in reading. And that has been, it's a big book. So I need a little break from a big book, but that is also one of the big chunkers. And dare I say that I might just finish Wolf Hall. Finally. I had so many plans for April being a big book month, but after the Deluge, not a chance. I would love to know what you're all reading, by the way. So if you're not here and you're watching this after effect, let me know down in the comments what you're going to be reading in April so I can add more books to my forever TBR. Brent says, kind of disappointed you didn't draw my 1,000-page part 1 of 2 sci-fi novel pick. I have been so keen to try Hamilton because I believe that's what your pick is. But every time I go to pick up his books, I have to do a bicep workout to pick them up. And I'm like, this is so large. It's so big. I have been in more of a sci-fi than a fantasy mood lately, though. So I would be curious if Peter Hamilton could scratch that itch. He has a standalone, though, because I think it's like Pandora's Star. What's the standalone he has? He has to have a standalone, I'm pretty sure. Also, speaking of standalones, I would like to read more Alistair Reynolds in the future because I'm still thinking about how much I love Diversion. Just thinking of sci-fi. There's so many things on my mind lately. Brent said, I also saw several people Boys Life as their pick. Might have to change mine to that next month. So I finally picked up the trade paperback, which meant that I'm going to read it and then gifted it to StoryTube when they were here. So I actually have to rebuy Boys Life trade paperback because they just now started carrying the one in my store that isn't like the tall, skinny, Crime Against Humanity. I don't know why they do that. I hate it. It's actually like a good floppy trade paperback. So I am going to have to reorder Boys Life, but that's one I've also been very much interested in. I think it's super sad though. I may have to take a little bit of a break from sad books though. I don't know if that's possible for me. Great North Road. That's the standalone I was thinking of. I think I own that. I own Pandora's Star for sure, but I think I also own Great North Road. Would that be a decent place to start with Hamilton? For all you Hamilton Knights out there? Andre says, is Mrs. Nutt still reading A Song of Ice and Fire? She just started A Storm of Swords. Very excited. Holy shit. Yes. Read Corbett. Yeah. I think that one's going to be easy. So also things in the pipeline for the channel. I'm going to be doing more One Bike book reviews, which was a normal video I uploaded where I read the first page of several books, rated it out of 10, talked about what it was trying to accomplish and whether or not it would go my immediate TBR. I had a blast making that video. It didn't reach the amount of people that like this does, which is totally cool. But it's something that I would like to give like 3 or 4 more attempts to because I just had so much fun doing it. And then I also have a couple other normal video uploads planned going into the summer that I'm pretty excited about. But I'll keep that on the wraps until I actually do it. Cy Kepler says, how far along in Solenoid are you? I think I'm about 100 pages, but I'm going to start it over and focus solely on it the next time I feel like reading something like that's extremely chunky. A lot of books that I want to read. 7S by Neil Stevenson, also a book. Anathem. Just need these books to be slightly shorter, which would be great. Story 2, Prophet Song, or is that also not a good follow-up to the Deluge? Prophet Song in May. Prophet Song in May, maybe June. We really need to read Prophet Song together. 1,700 pages of Cahill Book 4 going to keep April busy. That is absurdly low. Is it really 1,700 pages? How did they bind it? Oh, is it only ebook? The Culture session needs to happen. I read the first chapter of a session whenever it arrived back in the day, like a couple months back. Pretty banging. Pretty banging. Yes, and Mrs. Nuts, I think we're going to start doing patron picks for Mrs. Nuts as well. Maybe starting next month. Joanna Reed's Boy's Life audiobook is excellent. That's good to know. Maybe I should just do it on audio. People are saying Boy's Life made them cry. Jeez. Paul says, I've been struggling to read since New Year's, Jimmy, so a slow month isn't the worst thing. That's right. It's a marathon, right? Not a race. Not a race. Blood over Brighthaven. A lot of good stuff here. Brent said, don't start with Great North Road. Also, if you don't like Boy's Life, I'm out. Fair enough. I mean, I think Boy's Life's a pretty safe bet. I think. I hope. That book has been so hyped, though. Like, my God. Anathema is incredible. Andre, I've read the first, 200 pages. Does it ever stop being about clocks? Because that would be very nice. The ebook for the new Cahill book is 1,683 pages. That is frightening. That is frightening. So yeah, you have a kind of an idea of what I'm looking around, but just know when I mention books that I'm interested in reading, it doesn't mean I'm going to read them because I am as moody as a mood reader gets. I just always get the Patron pick done. Sometimes I DNF them if I don't like them, but I'm always going to attempt to finish it in the month that it gets picked. And I am so thankful that everyone came out on a Friday night to check this out. I'm always kind of astonished that people still listen to me talk. If I could give you some non-book thing to talk about, I would just like to say that I have been reminded recently just how important connection is. And connection is something that I struggle with a lot. And obviously I connect with many of you through my YouTube channel, and I'm very fortunate to have that. And I want to do a better job of enjoying that in the moments. So maybe that's something you can think about, is just enjoying the moments that you have and celebrating those things. I find that that's the joy in life, is the connection. And I think that books are a pretty fantastic thing to connect over, and dare I say the best, possibly, because the people that I've been able to meet through doing this and finding my passion and love in reading again, are those connections are worth more than anything to me, and have really given this old pessimistic curmudgeon guy a lot of things to be thankful for. So I'm also just very thankful for you for watching this, wherever you are, whoever you are, whenever this is that you're checking out on this. And I just very, very much appreciate you being here and supporting the channel, going on 5 years. It's pretty crazy, pretty cool. And I'm glad I have a place to come and get all these stupid thoughts out of my head, because I drive myself absolutely bonkers with it. So thank you. Thank you so much. Whether you've been a patron or you're just a viewer first time, or you've been here for years, just know it makes a difference in my life. And hopefully these videos can, provide some sort of a pick me up for other people and lead you down roads to read books and connect with different people. I just think that is what I'm here for. So thank you. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate it. And please let me know down in the comments what you will be reading in the month. Also, thank you for all the kindness in the chat. I very, very much appreciate all of you. I'm not going to read them out, because then I'll get teary-eyed, and no one needs that. So I love you guys. Appreciate you so much. If you like the video, you can hit like. If you dislike it, you can hit dislike, though that would be very rude of you, but fair. And if you love it, think about subscribing. If it's your first time here, I will have more regular uploaded videos. Remember those? I'm doing those again. Not all the time, but more than not. So that's good. I would love to have you along for the ride. There's a Patreon description. It's optional, but always appreciated. And until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.